Good evening. Call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mayor Kavanaugh,
Here.
Vice Mayor Brown,
Here.
Councilmember DePorter, Councilmember Magazine,
Here.
Councilmember Yates,
Present.
Councilmember Tolis,
Here.
Councilmember Leger.
Here.
All right, this is a special session to review the results from pavement analysis by IMS Infrastructure Management Systems with possible direction to staff. Grady?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight we have Stephen Smith with IMS. This is the firm that the Council awarded a contract back in November for the purpose of assisting the town in identifying the condition of our streets and also putting forth recommendations on pavement management and what we need to do in order to better maintain our streets. And so with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Smith, who will give you a presentation.
All right, welcome, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Miller, council members. Stephen Smith from IMS, we're the firm that you chose, and we are very delighted to be here tonight to give the results. Quick question, can it be dimmed a little bit so you can see? Oh, much better.
Just like that.
It's kind of a good thing, bad thing. It means we're talking about counting cracks in pavement here, so people are going to fall asleep. This is just the way it is. So hopefully we'll keep things going,
Okay.
moving along.
Don't forget to use your mic.
Oh, I talk with my hands and I cruise around. Now you're going to force me to stand here.
Yeah.
Okay, summary of the findings. Here's a 50,000-foot view of where we're at. Currently, the town has a pavement condition rating. If I took all the streets, put them in a blender, hit frappe, you've got a 60 out of 100, which is borderline okay. You also have 5% of your roads in a backlog condition. And by backlog, I mean they've had it. They're at the end of their service life. We can no longer repair them from the surface. We got to go start down deeper. And that occurs at a condition score of about 40. And that backlog number, that PCI of 40, it's just not a number we pulled out of the air. It's actually one that comes from the Orange County Transit Authority, OCTA, over in the LA area. They're pretty good at measuring all the roads in Orange County. The 40 is a suggestion from them, and it is something I've used for about 15 years and has served me well. It's also backed up by the American Society of Testing Methods, ASTM. So there's a bit of history behind that backlog number. Right now, about 50% of your roads fall into the fair to marginal category. And that's my big worry with the town of Fountain Hills. These are the roads that are just approaching the end of the service life. We've already said 5% of the roads have passed the end of their service life, but we've got now 50% in the next 5 to 10 years that are going to be approaching the same condition. So this is going to be kind of a theme and a bit of a worry that I bring to you and share with you is this backlog, this idea of backlog. Let's see if we can get this little thing to work now. There we go. Where are we at with funding? $2 million a year is your current level of funding. If I cast out about 10 years with that, PCI is going to drop like a stone. It's going to drop probably about 9, 10 points, not good. But it's that backlog number that's really going to jump up. So at about $2 million a year, 45% of the roads in Fountain Hills will have are pretty well past the end of their service life. That's a big number. That's really just unmanageable. Just to keep the status quo, in other words, to keep that average condition at about 60, requires between $3.5 to $4 million a year annual investment. Problem with that is your backlog still goes up to 30%, unmanageable. So I can keep your PCI steady at 3.5 to 4, but the backlog goes up. That's the direct equivalent of sitting you down on a block of ice, lighting your hair on fire, right around your belly. Your average score is okay, but it's an unacceptable condition on both ends. Realistically, about $6 million a year is what the town requires to control their backlog to a manageable level. Okay? Scale of investment. This is one thing I always like to share with everybody is what does Fountain Hills have invested in their roadway network? You got just shy of about 25,000 people, 163 centerline miles of road. Now, if I divide the miles of road by the people, you are at the high end of the scale. So that number is working against you. In other words, you have large lots, not many people to pay for a lot of roads. You also have a lot of infill areas where communities aren't contiguous. There's a big gap in between a lot of your housing developments. Those are roads that have to be paid for. So that kind of pushes your costs up. If I took all your asphalt, dumped it in a big pile, it's about 3.5 million square yards. That's a big area, enough to build a nice 2-lane road from here to New Mexico. If I put a value on it, about $200 million. So that's probably the single largest visible asset this town owns. And it's the one people judge you on. Now, in the past, you've made a lot of really good decisions regarding your roads, and I'm going to compliment you on that. Now we need to start looking forward and fix some of the lesser good decisions. So early look, PCI is 60, that's a score out of 100. That puts you in the fair to good category. Backlog, 5%. The maximum I'd want to see that is about 12, preferably about down around 10. So if I had to give you a letter grade today, got a B+. Today we're good. Tomorrow, not so good. That letter grade is declining fairly rapidly. A lot of people ask, why do pavement management? Why can't you just send the public works folks out, pick a road, go fix it? Well, the idea is to try and keep all the roads up here on the condition scale, up in the very good, the good ratings. It costs about $1 a square yard to keep them up there. If we let them slide down, very rapidly they go into a reconstruct requirement, about 8 times the cost. So we get really good life over about the first 10, 15 years of the road. We'll wait another 10 years, not so good. This is where Fountain Hills is today. You're at the steepest part of that ski hill going down fast. So we need to do something about that. The game plan would be to, over time, I'm not suggesting it's going to be fixed tomorrow, but over 10 years, we could move you up the scale onto what we call a perpetual life cycle. In other words, rather than rebuilding, letting all the roads fall apart and rebuilding them, let's get into some maintenance. I'm going to relate this to the family car. Your car's well past its warranty. You need to rehab it. New engine, new tires, all that sort of stuff. Eventually, we're going to get it up where we want to start doing regular tune-ups, regular maintenance, and push those big, heavy reconstructions out as far as possible. So we want to stretch the life of the average road through investments in maintenance and preventative maintenance routines and lightweight stuff. Let's try and avoid all those heavy reconstructions. So here's the concept. You folks are going to set some objectives. It's not up to me to stand here and tell you what to do. I don't believe in that. I believe you folks are the ones to set the goals, set the objectives, the policies, and the budgets. In order to do that, you need a good, firm understanding of your roadway network. That's my job. That's my job here today, educate you on where you're at, where you're going to be. So we ran around town, collected some information on that, did a bit of analysis, and came up with some different results and different budgets, and I'm going to be feeding them here tonight. At the end of the day, I'd like to see a balanced approach where I share with you my thoughts. You folks then can make the decisions on how you want to go. Tools to rate the streets, here's what we did. We took that nice van. We've got a few of them. They're about $500,000 a pop. And we cruised around every city, every street in the town. This vehicle collects objective information on the roughness of the roads, how smooth they are. It does a lot of work on rutting and cracking and pavement deterioration. And we did that from one end of the city, or one end of the town to the other, pulled it all together, following some industry standards, and came up with a pavement condition score for every block in the city. And we use that information then to set some priorities and to move forward, come up with some budgets. We also use that information to find out where you're at on the scale, let you know what you're up against, And this is the scale we use. It's been adopted from ASTM, the Army Corps of Engineers. It's a very popular one in use, and it's called the PCI Index, Pavement Condition Index. It's a 0 to 100 scale. It is not linear in nature. It's actually very curvilinear. I believe, back to my engineering speak, that's a sigmoidal curve, and I could give you the math formula for it, but then you'd
Yeah, it's okay.
yeah, it's not important. The main thing to note is it's flat up here, it's steep right here. At the upper end of the curve, streets are rated as excellent. That's usually above a PCI of about 85. Those are the streets that look good. People like to drive on them. They're smooth. You're going to get good life out of them. Below that are the very good streets, followed by the good, the fair, marginal. It's the poor and the very poor ones that we're rapidly approaching. So I'm going to chat with you about those throughout this presentation. They're the ones that we've got to dig up. So what we want to do is attack these guys right in here first. If you happen to live in that little house down the street with a white picket fence on the streets that's rated low, you might not be happy with me tonight, because Fountain Hills doesn't have enough money to fix every road every year. We're going to have to make some hard decisions. So later in this presentation, I'm going to talk about priorities, but I'll tell you right now, we're going to do everything we can to get the greatest cost benefit out of the money spent. And if you're on one of these roads right down in here, you might be getting the fuzzy end of the lollipop and get deferred. The simple reason is, that's really expensive, that's really cheap, I can fix a lot more of them, preserve the fabric of my network. That's a policy decision. I'm going to give you my recommendations for it, but you folks are going to have to decide, is that the direction Fountain Hills wants to go? We're fortunate enough that we do Beverly Hills. PCI score is much higher, pushing up 78, 80. They say, oh, heck no, you don't let nothing get down here. You keep our local roads looking really good. We're not worried about anything else. Okay? Because I'm not the one who's going to get the phone calls. You folks are. And I want to make sure that my recommendations dovetail with that eventually. Understanding the PCI score. Here's some pictures of what the roads look like. Very poor and poor. These are the roads past their service life. We could go out and grind and put an overlay on that, and we're just throwing money out the window. If you put asphalt on top of that road right there, it'll last maybe 2-3 years, and it'll just punch right through again. Those cracks will reflect through. That's in the bottom of a wash. That is actually your worst street in the town. You're looking close at it. You know where it is at? Galatia Drive. It's in pretty rough shape.
I thought it was my street.
No. That's a road that we've got to go down fairly deep to fix its problems. You can't do anything from the surface with it. About 5% of your network, about 8 miles, fall into this category. They're just too far gone, can't do anything with them. They really all have the same mode of failure. They're just old, they're tired. Drainage came into play, heavy loads. They have base and structural failures, rutting on them, alligator cracking. They're just tired. At the higher end of the scale, they're rapidly approaching that point of no return where we can't fix it from the surface. At the lower end of the scale, we always have to be wary of safety issues. These are the streets that might get deferred because an ugly street stays ugly for a real long period of time. If I didn't touch that road for 5 years, it's going to look the same as that right now. So we might make the decision to defer it, spend the money elsewhere, save some more, but someone has to monitor that road to make sure it is not a safety issue. Big old pothole forms in the bottom of there, there's going to be a lot of unhappy residents. So between a PCI of 25 and 40, they're going to be a priority. Below that, we're going to see what we can do about deferring. Streets with a condition score between 40 and 50. This is where I think it's 29% of your network. That's a big number, by the way. These ones, oh, they're tired. They're just about approaching the end of the service life. But the main word here that I want to leave you with is salvageable. If we went in on these streets, can't see it in the picture too well, but right here, that road is all alligatored out. It's fallen apart. But Justin and his crews could go dig up that area, put in a good patch, and then cover the rest of the road much cheaper. We could salvage it. Same with the road on the bottom. Right in this area here, it's failed totally. We got to fix that. Then we could put a much more affordable overlay on the rest. So these are the roads that are really going to get a priority. We're going to do what we can to salvage them, stretch that dollar. We've got a few other issues. Can't quite go back. The machine is fighting me. We've got a few other issues with these. Right in here, can't quite see it, but it's in the picture. Someone never put on the top lift on that road. 30 years ago when it was built, they ran in the curbs, they ran in the base, they put in the asphalt, they didn't give you a top lift. That's probably contributing to your headaches today, is a lot of these roads have that wedge curb that isn't a good design. It doesn't really afford you good drainage. It wasn't what I would have done. Compounded with that, they never gave you your top lift. So these are the streets we want to target to see what we can salvage. Next up are the fair. These ones are, I think, 25, a quarter of your network. They're not quite as ugly. We could do a few things with them. On some of the stronger ones, we could go out there, crack seal them up, pothole fix a few places, and put a lightweight surface treatment on it. Some of the other ones, we might have to do an overlay. But these ones are a much less invasive street to rehab. Anything we put on those, we'll get good life out of it. So we want to spend some money on these lighter weight stuffs, targeting the money specifically to see what we can do to avoid those more expensive options. For the green folks amongst us, it's a great idea. If we could put a surface treatment on these roads, it means we don't have to haul in and out as much asphalt. We don't pound your roads out as much. It's a good option. Streets in the good category. This is where I want to see the town on average. This is Mangrum Court. This is what I think the streets should look like on average, in the high 60 to 70 range, if not even a little better. Needs a bit of love, needs a bit of crack sealing, maybe a little surface treatment. But this is another place where we want to start targeting effort to rehab your streets. So we want to sweep in low, salvage all those roads that are approaching the end of the service life. We want to come in high as well, get in some lighter weight surface treatments. Kind of a bifold approach there. Very good. I like these ones. Go out there, crack seal it, call it a day, get some good service life out of them. One thing I want to mention to you that everyone seems to, I don't know what it is about cities and towns, whatever budget cuts come around, the first thing that always gets cut is crack sealing. Don't know why, just is. I like crack sealing. I believe in it. I think it works. People say it's ugly. Well, you know, it might be a little ugly, yeah, but it works, and it really helps salvage our roads. So that's something that I'm going to leave you with that I like. It's going to be up to you folks whether to decide. But the thing about crack sealing is, by the time the first crack appears, that road is already in need of rehab. So a lot of people say, well, why don't we let the roads all fall apart? Why don't you just leave them? Let them all fall apart and then we'll rebuild them. No, that's more expensive. That's probably the worst plan we could put forward. So I like to get in early, get in light, salvage what we can. Here's what I want them to look like. PCI score, 85 to 100. You got some real nice roads out there. There are 10, 12% of the network that have been worked on over the last few years and are serving well. You've got good folks here in the town making good decisions now. Let's see if we can help them out a little bit. Here's where you're at. That is, if you haven't figured out, I'm an engineer. I love graphs, love acronyms, love to bore people to death. So here's where you're at. I'm not going to say that's a good distribution. On the bottom of the graph is your pavement condition rating, and on the y-axis is the percentage of the network by area. And I like to use area because that relates to costs, and it kind of helps us out. Couple real big problems with this graph. The main one is the difference between these two columns right here. Because your PCI score is at the low end of the acceptable range, I like to use the analogy, Fountain Hills today is sitting on the beach. It's a beautiful sunny day. Got your little Mai Tai beside you, and everything seems just fine. 5 miles offshore, there's a big old tidal wave coming at you. And that's it right here. So if I had to measure your metrics of health of your roadway network, your average condition score is a 60 out of 100. I like to, at a minimum, put you in the 60 to 65 range. So you're at the just barely good enough category. Probably if I ran the analysis today, you might be actually down at a 59.9. So you get the check mark there, but only for today, not for tomorrow. Okay, so you make it into that range, and I like to think of that as a sustainable range. If you want to have a good economic plan, your roads have to be in the 60 to 65 range. The next metric is the amount of backlog. There's your backlog right there. It's about 5%. Today, that's good. End of 10 years, I've already said, it's going to go up high. So I would like to target it about 10%. Any city I've dealt with, if they can keep their backlog below 10%, is financially secure and fiscally responsible. Push comes to shove, I could see it going up to 12%, but I'm not going to recommend that. I would like to hold it at 10. Maximum about 15. I'm going to put you on blood pressure medication at that point. If it gets up to about 20%, literally you cannot pump enough money into your network to recover. You would be paying so much money into reconstruction and rebuilding your roads. It would suck back literally 100% of the budget. So we have to always be wary of the amount of streets we're leaving for our grandchildren in need of reconstruction. Because that's what it is. We got to take care of them. The third metric is the number of streets rated as excellent. Needs to be about 15% or higher. So you kind of missed the mark there. You're down around 11, 12%. And that 15% is a target because it shows ongoing investment. If you do all the math and the pluses and minuses, once you hit that magical 15%, everything else over time will take care of it, take care of itself. We kind of missed the mark there. So we need to take care of it.
Excuse me. What would be a sustainable distribution? It's not just a bell curve, is it?
It's a bell curve skewed to the right.
Okay.
I would like to see the peak about the 60 to 70. If I could draw it, it would be kind of like that shape right there.
So the majority falling into that good,
Good.
very good range?
Yeah. To give you an idea of where some of your neighbors are at, Scottsdale, I could say some bad things about them.
Easy.
More money than brains. No, I'm kidding. They're good folk. They're a client of ours, and they've got pretty good streets department. They know what they want. They're pushing for a PCI score of 80. Right now, they're in the high 70s.
Wow.
They've got some bond money working in, so they've got their network under control. Gilbert, probably more representative. They're in the mid-70s. Backlog very low, but they're kind of a high-growth city. Right, so they're depending on their newer streets to offset the older ones. The best city I've ever seen, Flower Mound, Texas. PCI score of, I think, 81. New city, all concrete, hard to miss up with that. Lowest I've seen is about a 53. A couple cities in Texas score pretty bad. And once you fall below that 60 range, you really start to notice, like, wow, how come all our streets are looking so ugly? And it starts to affect things like investment in the community, perception of the community. And earlier I said you've done some things right. Someone made some excellent decisions a long time ago. And I'll get to that in a few slides about maintaining that perception. Here we go. There's what your community looks like today. Your average network PCI, 60, backlog, 5%. That graph is colored like a traffic signal. Green is good, red is bad, yellowish colors in the middle, they're okay. You can see you've got these nice little pockets of green where you've obviously done a bit of work up in this area here. The main thing to note, and here's one of the good decisions that someone made, your arterials are in remarkable condition. Arterials are what most people travel on, so whoever made the decision, we're short of funds, let's protect those arterials, they did the right call. They followed the playbook exactly. So kudos to who's ever been doing that. Keep up that work. That gives us a really strong foundation to launch from for the next 10 years. It's a lot easier to maintain arterials than to rebuild them. So that's a good thing. Collectors, hey, they're at a 65. I'm happy with that. It met all my metrics. The PCI score's up there, the backlog's low, no problem. It's those gosh darn locals. They are at a 55, which in my book puts them pretty well in the ugly category. 8% of them are in backlog. That's what's driving the low ratings you're getting. It's really the locals that they're going to need a lot of love over the next few years. Here's what I'm going to suggest. Let's keep it above a 60. Work towards that. Let's keep it well above 60. Strive for excellence, settle for mediocrity. You get your roadway network above a 65, I can guarantee you your streets will look crisp and sharp. There's a big difference between a 65 and a 60.
Let me ask you a question about that map. You got yellow, and then you got, it's kind of a darker
Red.
yellow. Well, it looks like,
Oh, on the map?
yeah, it looks like brown, and then
Yeah.
there's red.
Yeah.
So yellow is,
Mediocre. That's all the marginals.
okay.
It goes from
And so as
dark
it
green
gets
is good,
darker,
light
to the
green.
red is the worst.
Red is the worst.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm not doing too well where I live.
Sorry. Justin can get you a full-size copy of this map. It's really hard to see in a PowerPoint show.
Yeah,
But the main thing is, keep in mind the coloration of it right now. Like, when you look at it right now, you don't see a lot of green. You see a lot of
No.
orange and yellows, and it's not such a happy one.
yeah.
So back to the targets, I want to suggest the town consider keeping the PCI score above a 65, backlog below 10. You solve those, things will be good.
Okay.
Funding estimates, without doing much in the way of math, if I just took the condition of the roads and say, fix them all today, I know I need a check about $65 million in size, and I know your budget needs to be $3.6 million. If you came and asked me today, what's the minimum budget we have without doing any forecasting or modeling or any of that engineering stuff? $3.6 million. All this says is, if I put an overlay on the road, I want to get between 15 and 20 years out of it.
Madam Mayor. But the 3.6, that just maintains
The status
a
quo.
status quo, but we're still losing,
The bottom end is
Right.
gonna bite us in the backside. Yep.
okay, thank you.
That's that block of ice, hair on fire thing. It's not where we wanna be. Okay? So I haven't even done any analysis. I know what we're up against. Oh, we don't need that, that's boring. Rehab needs. This is a really complicated graph, but it tells a story that I need to share with you because you're going to get the phone calls, not me. In order to stretch your budget the most, to get the greatest cost benefit about it, from the money spent, we have to make some hard decisions over the next 10 years. Some are ugly, some are easy, but they have to be made. This is realistically, if we boil it all down, this is a process of picking winners and losers. That's what it is. Some streets are going to get paved, some are going to slide. I'm presenting to you the most cost-efficient way of doing it, to try and stretch your money as far as possible. And that means making decisions. I'm going to share with you now some of the more important ones is, every red dot there is one block in the city. They're classified as weak pavements, moderate, or strong. Okay? The bottom scale is the pavement condition. The green lines are just little differentiators between what we can do to the road to fix it. Okay? So it's kind of a planning tool. And from here, I can then assign different rehab strategies to different roads based on their existing condition, and I can prioritize them. So if you happen to be on a street right up here, you're going to be funded first. Those are the ones that are the most salvageable. They give us the biggest bang for the buck. Then followed by these guys right in here. I can save those roads from the surface. I can spend $20 a square yard on them, and I can fix them and give you a good life. If I don't catch them now, I'm going to be paying $40, $50, $60 a square yard. So it's that cost of deferral that I'm always looking at. So here's my highest priority. Then I'm gonna start into these guys right here, because I think I can salvage some of those ones at a lower cost. This is where you folks need to start making some decisions. I put that in as priority 5. We've already run out of money by the time we get to them. And you don't have many of them, so I took a flyer on saying, well, put that as the 5th priority, and hopefully it'll fly with them. But these are the ones that are going to be deferred. We're not going to hit those first. My next priorities are going to be way over here. Let's start doing some lightweight stuff. That slurry seal type stuff, or microsurfacing. That's where the engineers go out there and mix up a bunch of asphalt and sand and spray it on the road. Comes out looking brown, turns black after a while. Great product. Highly believe in it. Basically, your roads, they need sunscreen. If you think about it, our desert sun is just killing our roads. Anything we can do to cover it up, to stop that oxidation, is a good thing. So I'm going to say, tackle these guys first. Yeah, I'll fix a few of these, but then go over here. The net upshot is, if you live on a street right here, it's an ugly street, it's tired, it needs repair, and if I look down and I see you fixing a road with a higher PCI, I'm on the phone to Madam Mayor saying, hey, your work crews are picking the wrong streets again. My street scored a 50, and you're not working on it, and you're out there working on that street that's a 65, and the answer is yes, because it's the best thing we can do for this town. It's good economic sense. A lot of people will come here and say, well, we should start at the bottom and start working our way to the top. Do it that way, worst first. No, that ends up costing you about 20% of your money. You've got too much lost opportunity. Remember earlier I shared with you, an ugly street stays ugly for a real long period of time? This is when it comes into play. We can let a few of these roads slide. They're really, really expensive. Let them slide for a few years. Go tackle some other ones. We'll get to them later before they become a safety issue. Those are hard decisions that have to be made. I've shared them with Justin and his team. Got a sign off there. Hopefully we'll take it one more rung up the ladder and share with you folks. Any questions on prioritization? This is a pretty complex part of stuff. Hopefully I'm leaving you enough information.
Councilman Magazine.
As you describe this and what roads we should attend to first and last and so on, I don't hear you indicating what kind of money we're talking about.
I will.
So, for
Next
example,
slide.
okay, I'll hold my question then.
Hopefully I'll get to it too for you as well. Before we get into the money parts, we need to set up some decision-making paradigms. I like the way you've taken care of your arterial roadways, and I'm strongly suggesting you keep up with that. Keep those arterials in the best shape. Commerce flows, buses flow on them. It's a great plan. I like it. Any money left over, we can go to the local, or the collectors, then the locals. The order of rehab will be based on the cost of deferral, as I mentioned, not worst first. Those are all decisions you will have to concur with. Some other decisions? Well, Justin's going to have to chime in and say, yeah, when I rebuild an arterial roadway, it's going to last 45 years. That point right there. Arterial roadway in Fountain Hills, if it gets rebuilt, has to last 45 years. That's a long period of time. A local road, I'm forecasting, is going to go out to 60 years. I'm not even 60 years old yet, so that means a road built today, or road built in what, 1958, would just be failing today. That's a long time to maintain your roads. But if you follow that perpetual life cycle and the suggestions I've left with you, we can make this happen. We've got excellent weather here. We've got excellent building conditions. We can make this happen. If this was in North Texas, they would boot me out of the room. They're lucky if they can get 15 years out of a road, period, let alone 40. So we have been very not optimistic, but conservative in our estimates. I'm not trying to sell you a Cadillac when a good Chevy will do. It's going to cost you some money to do things. I like to use every possible toolkit when I'm managing the roadway. I roll into a lot of cities and they say, oh no, we only do 2-inch overlays. 2-inch overlays fix all problem. No, let's give the roads what they need. Let the roads tell me what they need. It might be a 3-inch, it might be a total reconstruction. It might be 1.5 inches. I don't know. I don't know those answers, but the road will tell me. might be a surface treatment. So a lot of cities have some resistance to things like slurry seals, crack sealing, chip seals in the urban environment. I encourage you to open up some discussion on, hey, what are all these things? Do they help? Do they work? The answer to those is yes, in my mind. So I've left you with a comprehensive list of things I'd like to see Fountain Hills use in their toolkit. Don't let all the roads fall apart and pile on a 2-inch overlay. Doesn't work that way, okay? So these are what we call the operating parameters. Has to be the brains of it. They're in there. And this is what we came up with. So here's the answer to your question, okay? Now this is one of these engineering geek speak slides, and I'm going to apologize right now for it because I love this slide. This tells me everything I need to know about a town. Trying to explain it to folks is like, wow, it just doesn't work out that well. On the bottom here is the amount of money you're going to spend every year for the next 10 years. So where it says like 5,000, that's $5 million a year, every year for the next 10 years. If you give me a specific set amount of money, I will give you this line right there. That line is unique to Fountain Hills. You own it. That is how your network responds to money. So very quickly, if you say, well, Justin, we've got $2 million a year to spend over the next 10 years. What are you going to give me back? Justin can go to the graph and he says, oh, you give me 2,000, I'll give you a PCI of 50. Ick. That's the way it is.
Mayor,
Oh, now comes the question. Good.
Sorry, Councilman Magazine.
you haven't, at least I haven't heard you discuss what happens after you repair the roads to maintain them. And so if we have $2 million and we use it to fix roads,
Yep,
how much money do we need to maintain those same roads?
4 more million.
I'm sorry?
4 more million.
And so if you only have 2 million, you're saying, fix those roads and watch them degrade.
Actually, at $2 million, if I may speak frankly,
Mhm.
go build a swimming pool.
I'm sorry?
Go build a swimming pool.
So you're saying it's a waste of money?
You're not doing the citizens good. The roads will deteriorate faster than you can fix them at $2 million a year. They might appreciate something, a better investment. What I'm saying, without trying to be facetious, I'm just trying to drive a point home, is it's just not enough. You've got the responsibilities of spending this money, and you're spending other folks' money. $2 million just doesn't cut it. We're going to be low on PCI and really high on backlog. The streets are going to be ugly. That's just all there is to it. So there has to be an ongoing effort. And at $6 million a year, right there, that's the amount that I'm recommending, because that meets all my parameters. We end up with a PCI score in the mid-70s. Good. We have sufficient money set aside to get onto the perpetual life cycle of the roads. So in other words, instead of getting into a lot of overlays and heavy stuff, we're going to be doing more maintenance type activities to stretch those life cycle out.
But if you're spending 6 million, then how much are we talking about to maintain those same roads?
Same amount. This will go on forever and ever.
Well, you said,
Oh, after 10 years, you mean?
no. You presumably have to maintain the roads sooner than 10 years. You've got to do something to them, I assume.
Within the 10-year horizon, I built in road maintenance. After the 10 years, 'cause it's going to take the full 10 years to meet our targets.
Maybe I'm not making myself clear. We spend 6 million.
Mhm.
We fix roads and spend 6 million.
Per year for the next 10 years.
No, first year. First year we spend 6 million.
Okay.
Then we move on a few years. And yes, we're collecting 6 million.
Mhm.
But how much of that has to be used to maintain the roads that were initially brought up to standard?
Tough question to answer. You're catching me off guard with it. If you spend 6 million in year one, how much do I have to spend in the next few years? 3.5 to maintain them.
Okay, so 6 million isn't enough.
Correct. It's each year for the next 10 years.
And then you need more money each year to
Less
maintain the
money
ones
after.
you've taken care of.
Less money after that. Once the 10-year horizon is over with, we could probably drop down more to the $4.5 million range, give or take what inflation does to us, because we'll be higher on their performance curves. It's like right now, I drive 40-year-old Ford Torino. I spend a heck of a lot of money on rehabbing it. I'm always fixing something very expensive. In 10 years, you're going to own a nice Chevy. You're not going to spend money on new engines. You're going to spend money on windshield wipers, oil changes, lighter weight stuff. So $6 million per year for 10 years gets us to the goal. Then we can move more towards maintenance and sort of just take care of.
But the maintenance is over and above the 6 million per year.
No, for the first 10 years, it's built into it.
Ah, that's where I'm trying to go.
Then I didn't answer your question correctly the first time. It's built in. The 6 million over the 10 years assumes we're going to be maintaining what we've just built. Okay, is that?
Yep, thank you.
And then once we're done, we can cut her back a little bit.
So you feel better now? It's only 6 million.
And if you say it fast enough, it's not that hard. 6 million. Oh,
6
that's a lot of money.
million. Did you want to ask a question now, or?
No, I was gonna clarify, but piggyback on
Oh,
the
okay.
same thing, but the 6 million includes the maintenance and the capital improvement budget
Yes.
ongoing, so that the worst streets finally get done year 10 or whatever that is.
Yes, and then afterwards,
And then
we
the
have to do it
maintenance.
again.
I'm with you.
Okay. 7 million is what it'll cost per year for the next 10 years to keep the backlog at 5%. Unaffordable, so we're not even gonna go. That's the dash line over there. It's just a nice little piece of information. Steady state, right there. 3.6 million, that keeps us at the PCI of 60. That's also my lower threshold. But, as I've beat on you earlier, Fountain Hills is a backlog-controlled city. So this is the same type of analysis, but now we're looking at the growth in backlog at various funding levels. And this is what controls your budget. So the blue line here now is the amount of streets in a backlog condition at the end of 10 years at various funding levels. Here's the magic number we need to be at. There's that 10% limit, and it's $6 million a year. So that's a number that didn't just get pulled out of thin air. It actually has some substance behind it. You can see if we wanted to keep it down around the 5% limit, ouch. But if we wanted to just focus on the PCI score, ouch, because the backlog rises. That's just reality. We can't change these numbers too much by cutting here and there. They're big numbers, and we have to respect them.
Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, Councilman Leger.
Thank you. Could you reemphasize the importance of backlog, and could you reemphasize the importance of maintaining backlog at 10%? Because, I
Definitely.
mean, reviewing your presentation earlier and hearing you tonight, that seems to be the driver.
That is the driver. You hit it right on the head. Backlog are the streets that need to be fixed heavy and deep. They cost a lot. We've got to keep it below 10% to make this, the whole machine work affordably, cost effectively. We've got to always be careful when streets enter a backlog condition that we don't ignore them for safety, right? So we want to target certain streets before they hit a backlog condition, get in there, salvage them. Some of the streets that are in a backlog condition, we're going to take a gamble on and say, let's fix these ones right now and see if we can salvage them. Some of them are going to let slide.
So the bottom line is, if you're not managing your backlog increases,
Skyrockets,
skyrockets. Okay,
asymptotically.
thank you.
And once it's at 20%, game over. You could like triple your budget and you would never catch up. And I mean triple the 6 million, not the 2 million. You would be investing money unwisely at that point, which I think is my next slide.
Thank you.
Nope.
Questions?
Yeah,
Councilman?
did you consider inflation? 6 million today is not 6 million 10 years from now.
No, I've tried to include inflation and increasing budgets in my analysis, and I have failed miserably. Everything I've given you today is in 2018 dollars. I know.
Bad news.
Inflation bites, doesn't it? It just kills us. Where's the finance director? You might be, sorry, man,
The one with the abacus.
throwing you under the bus here.
Then this is all, I'm sorry to say it, then this sounds very unrealistic to me, because if you assume only 3% a year, which is low for building materials, over 10 years, you're cutting into that 6 million in a big way.
Correct. If you only budget at 6 million static without the cost of inflation coming into play, yeah, each year we do a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less until we're doing nothing. That's 6 million in 2018 dollars. If we want to look at it in 2028 dollars, 1 times 0.03 raised to the power of 10, that's a big number. Yeah, you're looking at 7.5 by the time this is all said and done. I'm an engineer, I'm really good at pavement management, I'm not good at finance, so I'm just gonna throw your finance director under the bus and say, have at her, man, I'll give you all the numbers. But, yeah, I agree with you. They're big numbers we're talking here. We have to control it sooner or later.
Okay, can I ask you for one more clarification on that
Yeah.
6 million?
Yeah.
You said that the poor and the very poor streets would need reconstruction. So that's not in the 6 million.
That is in the 6 million.
It is in the 6
We're
million.
taking care of your backlog and your PCI.
And that is reconstruction of the poor and the very poor streets.
Not all of them, some of them we're gonna try and salvage, but
Okay,
correct.
but it is
We're
reconstruction.
gonna get them out of that backlog condition.
Okay,
Well, all but 10% of them.
okay.
If you give me more money, I'll get more of them out, but not gonna happen. Let's be realistic, 10% is manageable.
Okay,
In all my numbers here I'm giving you, 0 to 5 years, I can give you a pretty good forecast. 5 to 10 years, it's more of a trend analysis. Anything out past 10 years is spitballing. So again, for your finance director, he knows the numbers will be bulletproof out to 2023 and a pretty good idea out to 2028. Cost of equity removal. This slide either gets me booed or congratulated. I never know which. But if you think about your roadway network, remember earlier I told you they were, what, $200 million in net worth? So if we went out and scratched the desert and paved out $200 million worth, we can equate that to a bank account. The quality of your roads is equivalent to a bank balance. And as we let the roads deteriorate through underfunding or not taking care of, we are pulling equity out of the system. Each year, we pull a bit of equity out of them, right? I mentioned to you earlier, the steady state number is 3.6 million. We're ignoring backlog at this point. But to keep the PCI score steady at a 60 is $3.6 million a year. So if you gave me $3.6 million every year for the next 10 years, I will give you back a PCI score of 60. The math works. So that's this backup.
What would the backlog be at 3.6?
30%.
Yeah, which is,
Bad.
okay. Thank you.
Unaffordable.
Thank you. Sorry.
One more, here we go. Here it is right here. That is your steady state number. So if you give me $3.6 million per year, we'll spend $36 million over the next 10 years, and the PCI score will stay steady.
But you won't get 36 million worth of work because of inflation.
Correct. I'm talking steady state dollars, good point. Now, at $2 million a year, that's this column right here, we will remove approximately $30 million worth of equity out of the network over the next 10 years. That is money we're pulling out of the bank account, throwing away. After 10 years, we have to make the network whole again. So we've got to replace that equity, and we've got to pay that $2 million a year. Our total investment at $2 million a year would actually be $50 million, not 20. You got to pay that equity back sooner or later. And so if I total up the difference, the 10-year difference between the steady state and the $2 million budget, I'm looking at 50 million versus 36. Or another way to put it, I wasted $14.5 million. I opened up that door and threw away $2.8 million every year. Just toss it out, let it blow away in the wind.
Another analogy, pay $6 million today to maintain that over 10 years versus if we do the $2 million, what is the net delta at the end of 10 years of that equity?
Big,
I know it's huge, but
because I didn't calculate the backlog cost because I'm afraid of it because the number gets skyrocketing.
if we don't deal with the backlog today,
You're
that
gonna deal
number
with it in
is
10 years.
exponential.
Exponential. We're talking hundreds of million, not tens of million. If you think about it, would I say 45% of your network will be in backlog at $2
So
million?
spending 60 million over 10 years
A lot cheaper.
without inflation is $60 million, but not spending that equity is worth,
$70 a square yard, do the math, you're probably looking at about $250 million.
$250 million.
Yeah, it's a big number. I didn't want to share it with you because there's that media desk back there and he's going to write that down somewhere. And it's not part of the presentation.
Councilman
It's a big number.
Tolis?
You hit it.
Just jump in.
Thank you. In your experience, in your dealings with many municipalities, it sounds like you're not only in the state of Arizona, but you're outside of
Nationwide.
nationwide. Tell me the correlation between allowing your streets to deteriorate to the point where you have such a significant backlog that you can't keep up, and what the effect is on property values.
Can I run away from that question and just dodge it totally, or can I give you my impression? The cities that have high backlog universally are ugly, right? I'm going to pick on one of my favorite clients. They're great guys. You ever been to Long Beach? Right? You drive their arterial roadway network, they're very much like yours. They're in good shape. You get off them, their local roads are not in good condition. They have a very high backlog. They're at about 26%, on their way up to about 45%. So they're fighting the same challenge. They've made the decision to invest in that. So they're going to take an ugly network, reinvest in their roadways, and make the city more livable, more pleasing, and they'll get the investment. If you look at, I don't know if you were in Long Beach 10 years ago, their downtown was pretty rough. They invested in it, the roads are where they started, business followed. There are some direct correlations between pavement quality and investment in life and commerce. We'll give you the quotes in the final report, but yes, there are. You get into some cities, no. Investment will always occur at the border of the city in the county because they don't want to inherit that huge liability. So it's not an expense. That's why I keep using the word investment. Pay it now, or the bigger bill comes due later. That's the straight up of it. Everyone clear on this, the cost of equity removal? That is a nasty slide, not one I like to share with everybody. 10-year plan. Oh, let's get into some happy stuff now. 10-year plan. This is if we went through and touched and did that $6 million per year plus inflation. That was a good point, by the way. I liked it. Every street on that map that has a funny color on it gets touched. So on that map, there's a 5-year plan, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, laid out, and then here's what I'm suggesting for the following 5 years. So those are the streets that will get touched in the next 10 years. And it looks like we're cycling through a great majority of the streets, and we're going to. And we're going to start maintaining them. Street that gets paved in year 1 will probably get a slurry seal in year 7 or 8. That's that routine maintenance. This is what we want to follow. Here's what it looks like. Remember that orangey, greeny graph earlier of the present condition? This is what the town could look like in 10 years. You can see a distinct flavor of green instead of orange and reds and browns to it. In other words, we met our goals. We were good stewards of the town's money. We spent it wisely. We got the network condition up, and we got the backlog under control. Doesn't mean we're finished. There's still a few streets right in here. They're pretty red. I think it's this guy right there. And I think he's one of my example streets. He just got the fuzzy end of the lollipop. There just wasn't enough money, even at $6 million a year, to fix them. We can't touch them all. Okay? By way of contrast, this is a number of streets that'll get done at $2 million per year. All we're doing here is playing catch-up hockey. We're running around and trying to salvage a few streets that we can. We're really just focusing on the majors. A few locals will get some surface treatment work on them to try and salvage them. But realistically, we're just not touching enough streets. $2 million today will be what, $1 million, 10 years? Pardon me?
$1,960,000 after 1 year.
After 1 year. You're killing me, man. Are you on one? Yeah, that inflation's gonna, shall we beat up the
That's
finance?
assuming
guy?
3%.
Price of asphalt's been going down lately, so that's working in our favor.
Petroleum.
It'll be going down, I have faith. We're just not touching enough streets. In 10 years, this is what Fountain Hills, the condition will look like after 10 years. We went from an orangey brown color at the current condition to a real lot of red. Just about half the network is falling into the red. At that point, man, it won't be a pretty town. I mean, you guys are one of the prettiest towns around, let's face it. Your streets will just not be in good condition. The local roads will be the hurting, but not only that, your arterial roadway will drop considerably as well. Remember, they're at a 75 right now. They're going to be in the 65 range. So everybody will lose at that. So with that, here are the recommendations. Let's keep it above the 60. $6 million a year, we'll blow through that target just fine, right? That's $6 million per year plus inflation. We'll have a PCI of 75, which will be a very healthy network. You'll go from the lower third of the cities I survey up to the higher third. More importantly, you will get that backlog under control. The decision to spend more money for Fountain Hills should have been made 15 years ago when the streets were all salvageable. But they wasn't. It's what we have to live with now. $2 million, no, won't cut it. You'll lose on every metric. PCI of 51 puts you probably the worst city I've ever rated. That's just the way it is. Backlog at 45%, you'd be the highest backlog too. I'm suggesting Justin and his team review the full suite of rehab strategies, make sure we like those. I'm going to suggest you adopt a cost of deferral approach, a prioritized approach, keep those arterials over the collectors, over the locals in play. All those harsh decisions that have to be made, I put before you. You can think about them, phone me up, I like questions. And then in a few years, do this all again. Give yourselves a scorecard. Are we losing ground or are we gaining ground? You are right at that tipping point right now. You're happy today on the beach, but that tsunami is not going to go away no matter how much wishful thinking we have. And with that, there we go. No, that top one, that is Imperial County, California. My crew actually stopped filming. Me. How do we rate this? And I'm going, really? The road's falling apart. You don't rate it. The bottom one is even cooler.
Louisiana.
Close, Florida. You ever heard of those? I got some swampland to sell you. Google Northport, Florida on Google Earth and look at the east half of the city.
The Rotunda?
No, it's just north of Port Charlotte. They went in the 50s and 60s, they plowed in miles of road. Hey, come down, get your swamp. Yeah, and then they asked us to survey it, and one of my knucklehead drivers, it's like, really? You drove it into a swamp? It was bad enough, and what you can't quite see in the picture. The embarrassing part was they were afraid of alligators and snakes, so they climbed out on the roof and dented the roof of the van. It's like, really, guys? Then they phoned the city, come get a backhoe, pull us out, and some media was scanning it, heard it, came and took pictures of us, so we said, well, we got to celebrate that. We're not going to hide that one. So. Questions? You've been excellent. I love doing this.
Councilman Yates?
Hopefully some good news. So the $6 million investment over 10 years, as we've all said, will kind of get us to that level that we're on a good system. What would the maintenance drop to at that point?
I would predict probably 4.5 range.
So
you'll
a
save.
10-year investment would yield, again, tremendous, what is that,
Big savings.
big, 50% return,
Yes.
50% savings?
Yeah. Quite frankly, you don't have many options. Not that I want to tell you your jobs, but man, your hands are really tied. Sorry.
What part of Canada are you from?
Really? Did that come out?
Yeah.
Out and about, or I didn't want to embarrass anyone from North Dakota or Minnesota.
I originally from Quebec, grew up out in Calgary. So that northern engineering stuff is really good, helpful down here in the deserts. But good ear there.
Councilman Leger?
Just a couple observations. First, regarding inflation, we're always concerned about inflation. What's the largest cost associated with road construction?
Oh, by
In terms,
It's
it's,
the cost of the asphalt.
yeah, which
Getting in
is, which is correlated with the,
there,
what,
oil
the commodity of oil, yeah.
and aggregate.
And we've seen that over the years go up and down.
That's
And
why I'm not guessing inflation. I've given up on that.
and we often piggyback with other municipalities in terms of
That's your best play.
of scale. So thanks for clarifying that.
But I want to point out your second biggest cost, and this is what Madam Mayor has to tackle: unfunded mandates by the feds. They're creeping in there with ADA compliance and green streets and complete street programs. That could easily add 40% to your bill. Now, we've included some money in here to take care of your ramps because it's good engineering and good municipal practice, but there's not enough money to go rip out every ramp. You've been doing a pretty good job. I've noticed on Saguaro, coming here into town, whoever did the design on that went out of their way to salvage what curbs and ramps they could and replace the ones they had to. Great planning. The feds recently just changed the steepness of ramps from 8.3% down to 7.5%. So all those ramps you salvage, next go around have to be yanked out. Unfunded mandates.
Well, that's something we wrestle with
Daily.
on an annual basis.
Yep.
Just one other comment. In reviewing your presentation, I was impressed with the slide that you had, Fountain Hills 10-year plan, 6 million, so forth and so on. Ironically, we're throwing 2 million at it now. I think that our plans, if a property tax passes, is to throw 4 million at it, so it gives us, meets that number of 6 million. You mentioned the word plan, and we have had folks that have come to presentations before our town manager where we've talked about property tax, and the concern was about a plan or a lack of plan.
Mhm.
And although this isn't completely vetted out, this is a plan. And if
This is the most cost-effective plan,
Mhm.
but I'm 50 miles away in Tempe, you're sitting here. There's going to be changes. There's going to be some, hey, we're putting a development here, defer that street, move this one. If we picked 75, 80% of the streets that you're happy with, touchdown.
No, I understand that. I'm just,
Excellent.
the
Vet
ta-
it.
the
Go ahead.
takeaway for the residents is that you've presented a plan.
Yep.
And of course, you're making recommendations, and I understand that. And the print is so small, it's very difficult for people to read, but
Blame him. He'll get some bigger ones made.
but if you were to look at that, you would see that there's dates there.
Yep.
Target dates in terms of when those streets will be done, and there's
Correct.
always also treatment recommendations.
Correct.
So it
And
not only
budgets.
identifies a street, it identifies a timeline, and it identifies the appropriate treatment
And budget.
and budget.
Yep.
So that is a good start for a plan in terms of having all of those variables in
It's
there.
always easier to present a plan and edit it because it's built on defensible assumptions and priorities. Remember my first slide about you folks get to set the priorities once you discuss
I
that?
understand that, but this is a plan.
Yeah, it is a good plan,
Thank you.
my plan.
Yes, Vice Mayor.
If we could go back to the slide, Fountain Hills 3 metrics of health, it's one of the very first slides.
I learned how to use PowerPoint better, I do this quicker.
You're doing great.
Mhm.
And by the way, thanks for your presentation. This has been very enlightening
Thank you.
And frightening.
and frightening.
That one,
Thank you very much. I have found this, as you started this presentation, you said that you were an engineer and you enjoyed graphs. I am not an engineer, don't want to be an engineer, but I do enjoy graphs. So with
did I just
that,
get slapped in there?
with that being said, you've taken us through the 10-year period,
Mm-hmm.
and is it possible, and I would think it would not be very difficult, to show this same graph in
What the post-10-year will look like?
yeah, maybe in a 2-year increment, and
Yeah, we could do that.
and show the 2 million and the 10 million, or the 6 million,
Yep, we can do that.
because that is a visual that I think that is,
I've got
well,
the
for
10-year
me,
one in my pocket, but I kind of hid it from you today.
well,
I'll
I
leave it with
would,
Justin,
I would enjoy seeing that,
okay?
if at all possible.
For sure.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Councilman DePorter?
Just a question. During the course of the 10 years, how many times do you suggest we re-study our roads? You had mentioned.
Well, I'd love you to do it annually.
Sure.
It depends on where you get your funding from. If you are relying on gas tax, you could push it off to 4 and 5 years. If you are going to bond it, right? GASB Statement 34, your finance director knows all about it, says, "Thou shalt be good stewards of long-term infrastructure assets and report back every 3 years," just so you can maintain your bond rating. Okay? So between 3 and 5 is the answer. Or every year. You know, I like
Anything
that
else?
answer too.
Councilman Magazine?
I want to go all the way back near the beginning to the methodology. You've got condition focuses on roughness, wheel path rutting, alligator cracking, and so on. This is all surface stuff. When we were discussing whether or not to do this engagement with you, we were told that you had some kind of instrumentation that looks below the surface at the road beds and so on. Is that correct?
We didn't engage it.
I'm sorry?
We didn't engage it. It's called, we didn't engage it.
What do you mean you didn't engage it?
We didn't use it.
Why?
It wasn't in our contract.
Oh, I thought that was the basis for us doing it.
Well,
No,
we can do it this way.
the council had concerns about the cost of this, if you remember, a year ago. And so when we brought this back, we were trying to reduce the cost so at least we can get this going. So we did agree when there was a discussion about this, if there were any streets that there were some questions on, specific streets, we could go ahead and do a contract amendment to do that. So that is a possibility if there's some streets that there's, like this one here that I think he's got, was that the Galatea might be one where we might want to do that, kind of see what the base looks like underneath the street.
Here's the engineering speak behind this. This is very common to do it this way.
But how can you vouch for the accuracy if you can't see what's underneath all of this?
Distresses manifest themselves in different ways. Some are what are referred to as, I'm going to go way into the engineering side of it. Some of them are what we call load-associated distresses, caused by the heavy truck traffic, right? Rutting, alligator cracking, bit of roughness, longitudinal cracking. These are caused by heavy traffic. They're caused by not adequate subgrade. Right? So we know what's underneath just by what we see on the surface. Right? Some of the distresses are caused by weathering and oxidation. Those are non-load. We can classify each road based on these. Is it as accurate as if we went out and tested each road? No. But there's a trade-off. For us to do what's called a network level structural survey, it adds to the price. We do get better. But right now, we're only in the planning stage. Once we move to project level work, we can drag that equipment out here and say, hey, Steve recommended a 3-inch overlay. Let's test it. Let's get that down and see if we can get away with a 2-inch. That's called project level testing. Excellent idea. There's a lot of other firms here in town that we work very closely with that help us out with that sort of stuff.
Plus or minus 10%. If you did that, based on your experience?
It saves the city money, or town money.
Well, that's not really the question. The question is, would your figures in this presentation, do you think it would change much based upon other engagements you've had?
No. We did Atlanta, big sample there, with and without the structural testing. It changed the PCI 1 point. Individually, there's a few changes here. What it does do is more at the project level, we have more confidence in the recommendations. I'm confident in these recommendations. They're not going to change more than 5% up or down. Not going to happen, right? So to answer your question, would have been great. Didn't occur. We'll deal with that. But good question.
Any other questions? Councilman Leger?
Just to clarify, so from an engineering perspective, you're basically saying inspection and experience of the surface condition is predictive to a certain degree of accuracy of the subgrade.
This is horseshoes and hand grenades. Close is good enough.
Okay.
We follow the ASTM protocols. This is what the Army Corps of Engineers, how they go about doing it. And they're pretty good agencies. They know what they're doing on occasion.
Thank you.
So
Thank
we
you.
followed them, very industry standard testing protocols. Our friends over next door in Scottsdale, no, they asked us to do the deflection testing. They got a bit more money. They wanted to stretch their resources as far as they can. So it was a good investment. Yeah.
Any other questions? No? We do have one speaker card. We could bring up our resident.
Bob Shellstrom.
Okay.
Thank you, and I did appreciate what I saw.
Please come up to the mic
Oh, certainly.
and identify yourself.
I took a look at this online as well as here, and it was a very nice public relations presentation, but you're putting a lot of numbers here, okay? And to get those numbers, you had to do very substantial calculation spreadsheets, assessment sheets by segments for what must have been, what, over 100 segments that you evaluated in the streets? Thousands. One of the things that I've had issues with when I've been other committees and other issues was sometimes when we started looking into the nitty-gritty on some of these things, there were other solutions that presented themselves. For example, once I was on a committee for a school district for a building and a finance committee, and we had a very large parking lot that the consultant came in and said, you need $1.6 million to completely rip up, produce a new subgrade, and take it in there. When I actually requested the soil reports, I found out that they had a great subgrade modulus through about 80% of it, but there were just 2 localized areas that needed a replacement. So what we did is we took care of those problems, defined the problem differently, and we just did the overlay on the rest and just did heavy remediation in 20%. It cost $700,000 instead of $1.6 million. And after 10 years, it's working very well except for some sealing. So the question here is, with the backup assessment documents and calculations, when will they become publicly available for us to look at?
That I can't answer. There's Justin, he'll let you know.
Okay.
I submitted to council, but I think I owe it to them for them to see them first.
Well, that's fine, but, so they haven't seen them yet?
Not the details.
Okay, now, with what you put out here, usually when I've done presentations for engineering reports, and I had been licensed as many as 8 states, got degrees in civil engineering as well as mechanical engineering and 4 decades experience. Usually you go through a little more methodology. What you gave was a great qualitative mention that's, going to be in any kind of reference for this thing. But usually you look into more of how you did those assessments and to get into those grades. Like you've got ASTM D6433, a few others, and Army Corps of Engineers items. Usually that would be seen because, let me tell you my concern. When you look at a certain segment of road, you may have alligatoring over maybe 10% of that segment, okay? Now, some people might make a call and say, well, this is all going to be graded out at a 40. While 90% of it, if you just took a look at that as a separate segment, you might have looked at something that's maybe a 90, okay? So when we look into things like this, like the situation I saw with the parking lot, that comes very important. And the fact is, you're giving us a $6 million a year number, and that may be perfectly accurate and the best possible scenario. But then again, the old trust but verify kind of thing I think is important. And seeing the rubric by which you made a decision for those classifications may have been straight.
Mr. Shellstrom,
Sure.
your time is up, please.
Okay, a lot more to say, but sorry.
Okay, everybody gets 3 minutes. Were there any other speaker cards?
No, Mayor.
Okay. Mr. Smith, is there anything you'd like to add? If you'd like to,
I think it would.
please use the mics because we're broadcasting this.
Okay, what
Thank
he
you.
said, perfect, bang on, rightful in any way, but we did include it on, I'm just going to go forward because I think he kept up with it, so might as well share with him. One of the things we did, and he nailed it, right there.
Okay.
That's exactly, there you go. Hopefully, you can't quite read that graph.
Okay, Mr. Smith, you have
I
to,
have to stay at the
and you have to face this way for the camera.
Okay, I have to face this way for the camera.
Sorry.
All right, I'm
Uh-huh.
gonna try. Right here, it says, on this moderate strength road right here, you're supposed to put a thick overlay. But because we look at the distresses, and if we deem the road to be strong, we're gonna put a moderate thickness overlay associated with some, what we call R&R, remove and replace structural patching. So just like the parking lot example, hey, we don't have to put the thick overlay on the whole road, let's patch it and put a moderate overlay on it. So we looked at that, and that's an excellent point, and it needs to be followed through. Likewise, if the road is deemed to be weak, we put the thick overlay on it, and we do some more structural patching in order to stave off a full reconstruct. He got it. I like it. It's good stuff, and it was included in the 6 mil.
Okay. Is there a source to that? Councilman, excuse me, no. You cannot ask him any more questions. Councilman Yates, you have the floor.
Along the same lines, so are those project questions that would be studied at the point when we're about
At the
ready to spend?
project level, once we move off of this network level survey and start picking the individual projects, you bet.
So the value engineering could still occur, this is just
Should occur.
will occur.
Will occur. Even
Will
better.
occur.
Yes. You will drag out an FWD, maybe a GPR. You will hire the geotechnical firms to bore some holes and say, did IMS get it right, or are they out to lunch?
Gotcha. All right, thank you, ma'am.
Anything else? We have a meeting at 5:30, so if we're all satisfied, we've had all our questions answered, and I'm sure we can go through Grady and contact Mr. Smith for any further questions that we might have.
Perfect.
Thank
very
you
kindly. I
very
enjoyed
much.
my time here.
Awesome presentation. Yes, you have confirmed our worst fears, but we have to face the reality. So
Wasn't my
thank you.
goal to frighten you.
I know, but thank you very much. It's an excellent presentation, and we appreciate all your hard work on this for us. Okay. Yes. Okay, I need a motion to adjourn, please. And a second. All in favor? We're adjourned. We'll be back at 5:30.